Thanks for being here. I'm Stephen Romo in for Joe and Savannah today. And we begin this morning with the holiday travel rush ahead of the new year. If you're heading out today, be prepared. It is expected to be one of the busiest and worst days on the road, along with one of the busiest days for air travel as well. And the weather could cause even more headaches for travelers. A major storm system making its way up the East Coast, and millions in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware are also under flood alerts. Meanwhile, folks in the Midwest are still digging out from more than a foot of snow from storms earlier this week. So let's get straight to your morning news now weather. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with more. A lot to keep track of here, Michelle.
A lot. Hi there, Stephen. Great to see you. Yeah, we have some problems out there. We're not looking at huge blockbuster storms anymore, but still looking at some problems with low clouds, some leftover rain. We're looking at rain on both coasts as we head throughout this Thursday. So this is what today looks like. Rain developing in the west. We're going to get a little bit of a break this morning before we start to see another front moving on shore. Later on today, it's going to be really windy, so you don't need rain to really slow down the airports. The wind could do damage enough with slowing down and causing some delays. Then on the in the northeast, we're looking at rain and wind. So we had some really heavy rain that moved in overnight. That is on its way out, but we're left over with low clouds, some fog in spots. We're looking at some snow on the backside through the Midwest, some rain and snow showers, not amounting to much, but again, could slow us down. And then in Florida, we're looking at some rain, and it could be heavy at times throughout portions of southern Florida. We're looking at sunny and mild conditions in the south central states and turning mild in the northern plains. So still unsettled in the east. You can see all those bright colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. That's where the heavy rain is falling right now. So Long Island up to portions of New England, and this is kind of take its time to get out of here. So we do have some leftover rain. Most of the mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, has cleared out at this point, but still can't rule out the chance of a scattered shower throughout the afternoon. And then it's back to the Midwest, where we're looking at some snow showers and some rain showers. Still 11 million people impacted by flood alerts. That's mainly because the rivers are still running really high, also the streams and the creeks. So we're going to watch that as we go throughout the day. So this is what it looks like, just a dreary December. That early steady rain is moving out. We're looking at leftover in New England this morning. And then we have that upper level system that's bringing that snow and rain in portions of the Great Lakes. So we're going to watch that. We won't see much accumulation, but could see some accumulation along the Appalachians. Rainfall forecast, notice it's not a whole lot. We're looking at a quarter inch, maybe a half inch in some spots. Right along the coast, we could see an inch right near Boston, but that is about it. Still, though, we're going to see the low clouds in place. That will impact air travel. We're looking at likely delays in Boston, also New York City, Chicago, some possible delays in D.C., San Francisco as well, and Miami, probably seeing some delays with that rain in place. Then tomorrow, we're looking at likely delays in Boston, also New York City. Philadelphia should be in the clear, also D.C., so that's good news. Chicago looking at the chance for some lingering rain showers, so it could slow you down at the airports as well. That's the East Coast. The West Coast, we're looking at another system moving on shore later today. Isolated morning showers, and then we're looking at an afternoon break, but still really windy. Winds gusting up to 40 miles per hour. Then by tomorrow, that next storm system moves on shore. Notice all that moisture with it, those bright colors showing us that we expect some heavy rain along the coast there. It's kind of like a wall of water just moving on shore. So anywhere from 1 to up to 3 inches of rain throughout portions of Northern California. Eureka, we're also looking at Redding, looking at some really heavy rain, but that extends down to San Francisco as well. All right, let's fast forward to Saturday because we're interested in that New Year's outlook. We're looking at rain and snow throughout the West Coast. We're looking at scattered snow showers throughout portions of New England, parts of the Northeast. And then could see some snow showers along the Appalachians as well. Plenty of sunshine throughout the south central states. Also dry throughout the northern plains, the central plains, portions of the mid-Atlantic, the Tennessee Valley. Temperatures will drop. We're really mild right now. We're going to see temperatures returning closer to normal as we head towards Saturday. And then New Year's Eve, we're looking at temperatures chilly along the East Coast, but they've been much chillier this time of year. Quiet weather pattern kind of sets up in the middle of the country. Some snow showers in the Intermountain West, also the Rockies. A chilly start for portions of the Southeast. And then look at the South Central states. Pretty nice. Mostly cloudy skies, 65 degrees, 77 as we look towards Brownsville. And then as we ring in the new year, we're looking at some slick roads in portions of the Ohio Valley into the Tennessee Valley, and a few showers, Stephen, in parts of the Gulf Coast states. Back to you.
All right, Michelle Grossman, thanks so much. And with all of that winter weather comes more time indoors, and that often means more sicknesses are being spread person to person. According to the CDC, respiratory viruses are on the rise ahead of the new year, and some people are unable to shake those symptoms. As of December 16th, people hospitalized by the flu shot up nearly 200%. COVID hospitalizations increased to around 40%. RSV also on the radar. It's often seen among toddlers and children. Experts say symptoms for any one of those illnesses can last for weeks and even months. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Vin Gupta joins me now for more on this. Dr. Gupta, good morning. Thanks for being here. It's some pretty alarming sounding numbers. Are they as serious as they sound? How concerned should we be?
Well, Stephen, happy holidays, and thank you for platforming this. This is our new normal. We're going to see this type of surges in certain parts of the country, especially those parts of the countries that haven't seen as significant of an uptake in boosters, as significant of an uptake in prevention measures as other parts of the country. So this will be regional. We are seeing in parts of California an 80% occupancy rate in ICUs. There is going to be this regional surge, especially as we enter into January. We expect a lot of these viruses to peak by the end of January.
And many people are complaining, doctor, about these symptoms continuing for so long from RSV, COVID, and the flu. So why is that happening?
We think that just like with COVID and long COVID, these chronic symptoms, we've heard a lot about long COVID, many weeks, if not months of these chronic symptoms. Turns out the same thing happens with flu, with RSV, that these viruses tend to stick around. Either the virus itself or the inflammation caused by the virus causes these long-term symptoms. So this is really a part of a larger chronic syndrome related to all respiratory viruses, not just COVID-19, as we're learning more.
COVID's just changed the way we think about those viruses that have been around for so long. A lot of people have coughs, and they try to figure out if they have COVID, the flu, or RSV. Are there any ways to go by the symptoms from differentiating those, or do you really just need to take a test or go to a doctor?
I'm glad you brought that up, Stephen. The short answer is it's really difficult based on symptoms. I say this as a pulmonologist. Flu does tend to cause very high fevers. COVID tends to cause total body symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, RSV, usually high-pitched wheezing, especially in young kids. But you cannot really distinguish just based on symptoms alone. So if you're medically high risk, over 60, if you have an infant at home, and they come in with flu-like symptoms, if they're developing flu-like symptoms, get a test.
Yeah, good advice there. And as far as COVID, the latest variant, what can you tell us about that? Are there different symptoms? Is it more contagious?
Really not different symptoms. Some are noticing maybe more sore throat, less loss of taste or smell like we saw earlier in the pandemic. So take that for what you will. Usually in severe cases, though, no difference here. Shortness of breath, pneumonia symptoms. This is more contagious, though. As we continue to deal with newer variants in the future, COVID is becoming more contagious. That's something to keep a lookout for. Prevention works. Masking at 30,000 feet in the grocery store, of course, getting that booster shot. Those measures still continue to work.
You mentioned masking, of course. We saw those numbers for the vaccination rates. Is there anything else we could do to protect ourselves?
I would say for those that are medically high risk, go to test2treat.org, test the number 2 treat.org. For those that are medically high risk, if you end up having symptoms for whatever reason, let's say prevention didn't work, you're in reaction mode, go to that website. It's a free government-provided service for telehealth and then treatment if you're positive for COVID or flu. Early treatment really matters when paired with early diagnosis to keep you out of the hospital. So test2treat.org, critical if you're already developing symptoms.
Some very important tips. Dr. Vin Gupta, thanks so much. All right, turning now to the race for the White House and the state legal challenges aiming to keep former President Trump off of primary ballots next year over allegations tied to January 6th. The Colorado Republican Party is asking the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn a state ruling earlier this month that disqualified Trump because the state court found he violated Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which bars people who engage in insurrection from holding office. Meanwhile, Michigan's Supreme Court rejected a similar effort to remove Trump from the state's ballot. That court said it was not persuaded by the argument. To break it all down for us, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, good morning to you. So let's start off in Colorado. The state's GOP going to the Supreme Court about this. I think under the current terms, he will remain on the primary ballot during this period. What will Republicans argue to the Supreme Court if they decide to take the case? What will they argue to the Supreme Court?
They have a number of different arguments, one of which is that the president is not an officer within the meaning of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Recall that the Colorado lower court concluded that, yes, he committed insurrection, but no, he's not an officer within Section 3. Therefore, even being an insurrectionist, he would remain on the ballot. The Colorado Supreme Court simply held opposite on the issue of whether he was an officer. The other argument they have, for example, and they have a few, is that Section 3 requires animating legislation. That sounds a little weird, but I'll give you an example. You're too young to remember Prohibition. I remember Prohibition. But you'll recall those amendments by themselves did not create Prohibition. There was a separate act of Congress called the Volstead Act that actually enacted Prohibition. So the question here is, does Section 3, does it by itself create this prohibition on an insurrectionist, or does it require Congress to enact some legislation, some further law, to actually bring that section to life? And that's another argument the Republicans are making here. Interesting that both of those arguments can proceed even if Trump was deemed an insurrectionist after an evidentiary hearing at the Colorado's lower court, trial court.
As far as the Supreme Court goes, they've never heard something exactly like this before. Do you think that they will take it up?
I think they're likely to take it up. I mean, if I were to give you percentages, they have to be in the 90 percentile because not only that, you have other states arriving at different conclusions. Now, the Supreme Court can say, well, that's fine. That's the way federalism works. Those states have their own laws. They have their own systems. They decide who gets on the ballot. But in a federal national election of the president, that obviously implicates constitutional issues, federal law issues. So very likely, I think they're going to take it up. I mean, I would love to say absolutely, but I can't commit myself to that because there's that tiny chance they might not.
Do they actually want to take it up, though? I feel like they might want to pass on it as they have other recent things in the past.
Generally speaking, the Supreme Court will try to avoid deciding issues of state law if there are what are called adequate independent state grounds for the lower court's decision. However, in a case like this, because it implicates federal law, because it implicates the U.S. Constitution, likely they will have to take it up, even though they might express a preference for allowing something that exists on adequate state grounds to remain as it is.
Fascinating to follow. Michigan, let's talk about them. Different situation there. The request to remove Trump from that state's primary ballot, that failed. Trump actually reacted on social media saying Michigan has, quote, strongly and rightfully denied the desperate Democrat attempt to take him off the ballot. So what's the thinking for that legal decision and the other states who have sided with Trump on this to not disqualify him for January 6th?
This is a great example of how different state courts can arrive at different conclusions based on their own law and procedural differences. For example, in Michigan, there was no evidentiary hearing, and a Michigan Court of Appeals, the court below the Supreme Court, actually observed that they actually discussed the Colorado Supreme Court opinion. They said, well, look, that's a little different. They had an actual evidentiary hearing to decide whether or not Trump was an insurrectionist. We didn't have that here, so that is a distinction that has to be taken into account. The other thing is, but I mean, you have the Supreme Court, the Michigan Supreme Court concluding, or excuse me, the lower court, Michigan Supreme Court just sort of adopted it, but you have that court in Michigan concluding that this may not be what's called a justiciable question. There's an issue as to whether or not courts can even hear this issue, or if Section 3 is something that is really committed only to other branches of the government other than the judicial branch.
Justiciable, is that the word?
Justiciability and non-justiciability, yes,
wow,
exactly.
Learn something new from Danny every day. Also want to learn something new on this. Special counsel Jack Smith yesterday filing that the motion in Trump's federal election interference case to try to block him from talking about the conspiracy theories and making political arguments during that trial. How will that play out, and do we think that Trump will abide by it?
Everyone knew this was coming. This is a major motion for the Jack Smith team, and it's really like a motion in limine. We make these motions all the time to try and prune the bonsai tree of trial before you get to trial, and this would be a major win if the government could get the court to preclude the defense from raising any of these political arguments. I'm being persecuted. The Biden administration is after me. Those would be central themes of Trump's defense. If they can preclude them and argue that they're simply not probative or relevant, then that's a huge win for the government.
Seems very hard to do to keep politics out of that.
Can't be done, I don't think.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Danny Ceballos, thanks so much. Well, in Washington, House Republicans are stepping up their efforts to impeach President Biden. According to a letter obtained by NBC News, House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer and Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan requested the White House hand over any records of communication linked to the deposition of the president's son, Hunter Biden. Comer says the committee is looking to determine whether President Biden was involved in Hunter's decision to defy a congressional subpoena just 2 weeks ago. GOP members say they don't have evidence that those communications exist. However, actions to influence or obstruct the committee's proceedings could be an impeachable offense. The White House has yet to respond to NBC's request for comments. All right, turning now to Gaza, where we're getting our first look at what Israel calls the largest Hamas tunnel it has uncovered so far. NBC News foreign correspondent Josh Lederman has an inside look at the tunnel and how it worked.
We start our journey into Gaza at Erez Crossing, the border checkpoint ransacked by Hamas on October 7th, now in shambles. Entering northern Gaza on foot, the sounds of gunfire ricochet across the desert. As we pass a vast wasteland of mangled steel and concrete blocks, tanks rolling by, and the hum of Israeli drones overhead.
The Gazans call them mosquitoes, and they are a daily reminder that everyone here is being watched.
The Israeli military has brought us here to see what it says is evidence of how Hamas has burrowed itself into Gaza's population.
You've got reinforced concrete. They have electrical wires. There is plumbing overhead. I'm about 5'8", and you can see this goes way above my head, so it's probably about 10 feet tall.
NBC News can't verify what this tunnel was used for or when. But Israel is under increasing pressure to prove its allegations about Hamas, especially after its deadly onslaught at Gaza's largest hospital last month. Several independent analyses later raised questions about Israel's claim that Hamas had command and control facilities deep underground.
Showing these tunnels to the media, is this an effort to justify incredible numbers of Palestinian deaths?
I think this is an effort to justify the fact that we have no choice but to be in Gaza fighting Hamas, and that those civilians were condemned the moment that Hamas built these tunnels underneath them.
The war fueling tensions across the region. An attack drone launched against U.S. forces in Iraq. And yet more airstrikes in Khan Yunis, Gaza's second largest city.
Our thanks to Josh Lederman for that report.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.